Dr. Zethkari had seen many terrible things in his long career as a healer. His blue skin had turned pale watching patients die from diseases that had no cure. His forearms had worked tirelessly to save lives that couldn't be saved, but nothing had prepared him for what came through the doors of the Galactic Medical Station that day. The emergency alarm screamed through the halls. Red lights flashed everywhere. A human colony ship had sent out a distress call. Something had gone very wrong and they needed help fast. Incoming shuttle with critical patient, announced the station's computer. Estimated arrival in 2 minutes. Dr. Zethkari pulled on his surgical gloves and checked his instruments. He had treated humans before, but not many. They were a newer species in the galaxy, still trying to find their place among the older, more established races. Most doctors found them interesting but fragile. The shuttle doors opened with a hiss of escaping air. 2 human medics rushed out, pushing a floating stretcher between them. On it lay the smallest patient Dr. Zethkari had ever seen brought to his emergency bay. She was just a child. Her dark hair was matted with blood, and her small body was covered in burns that made the doctor's stomach turn. One of her arms was completely gone, torn away at the shoulder. The machines attached to her body beeped frantically, showing vital signs that should have meant death. "How is she still alive?" whispered Nurse Kayla, her green tentacles shaking as she looked at the readings. The human medic, a tall man with tired eyes, shook his head. "We don't know. Maya should have died hours ago. Her injuries are beyond anything we can treat on the ship." Dr. Zethkari moved quickly, his 4 hands working at once to assess the damage. Plasma burns covered 30% of her skin. Internal bleeding in multiple organs. Severe head trauma. By every medical standard he knew, this child should be dead, but she wasn't. Her heart kept beating with a stubborn rhythm that defied logic. Her breathing, while shallow, remained steady. Most shocking of all, when he ran deeper scans, he could see that her body was already trying to heal itself in ways that seemed impossible. "What happened to her?" he asked as his team rushed to prepare the surgical bay. The human medic's face darkened. "Ship malfunction." Plasma conduits exploded in the family quarters. Maya's parents and little brother. He couldn't finish the sentence, and she was the only survivor? The only one in that section, yes. By the time we reached them, her family was already gone. Maya was barely breathing, but somehow she held on long enough for us to get her here. Dr. Zethkari had heard stories about human determination. Other species whispered about it in medical conferences. Humans who survived injuries that would kill most other beings. Humans who fought diseases that should have been fatal. He had always thought these were just stories. Maybe exaggerated tales to make the new species seem more impressive than they really were. Looking at Maya Chen, he realized the stories might actually be true. They moved her into the surgical bay, where the real work would begin. Dr. Zethkari's team was the best in this part of the galaxy. They had saved patients from dozens of different species, each with their own unique biology and challenges. But this was different. Her cellular regeneration rate is unlike anything in our databases, reported Dr. Veltar, the station's chief researcher. "Look at these readings. Her body is adapting to our treatments in real time." It was true. The medicines they gave her should have been toxic to human biology. Instead, her system seemed to learn from them, processing them in ways that helped rather than hurt. When they used Altarian healing gel on her burns, her skin didn't just accept it. It improved the treatment somehow, making it work better than it ever had before. "This shouldn't be possible," muttered Dr. Zethkari as he worked to stop the internal bleeding. "Her immune system is actually enhancing our medical procedures." Hours passed. The surgery that should have taken 2 hours stretched into 6, then 8. Not because things were going wrong, but because they kept discovering new ways that Maya's body was healing itself. Bones that should have taken months to mend were already starting to knit together. Organs that had been badly damaged were regenerating tissue at an incredible rate. "Doctor," called Nurse Kayla, "you need to see this." She pointed to the scans showing Maya's brain activity. Instead of the chaotic patterns they expected from severe trauma, her mind showed something else entirely. Even unconscious, even barely clinging to life, her brainwaves displayed a kind of focused determination that none of them had seen before. "It's like she's fighting," whispered Dr. Veltar. "Not just her body, but her mind too. She's choosing to live." As the hours wore on, other medical staff began to gather. Word had spread through the station about the human child who wouldn't die. Doctors from other departments came to observe, some out of scientific curiosity, others simply amazed by what they were witnessing. But it wasn't just Maya's incredible healing that caught their attention. It was something else, something that made even the most experienced medical professionals uncomfortable. Her injuries told a story that didn't match the official report. Dr. Zeth Carey had seen enough plasma explosions to recognize the patterns they left on living tissue. What he saw in Maya's body didn't match random equipment failure. The burns were too precise, too focused. The damage to the ship's systems, based on what the human medics described, sounded deliberate. These weren't caused by an accident, he said quietly to his team. Someone did this on purpose. The thought made him sick. Bad enough that a child had lost her entire family in a ship malfunction. But if someone had deliberately caused this tragedy, if Maya's survival was interfering with some terrible plan, should we contact Galactic Enforcement? Asked Nurse Kayla. Before Dr. Zeth Carey could answer, Maya's eyes opened. They were brown, the color of Earth's soil, and filled with pain and confusion. She looked around the medical bay with the lost expression of a child who had woken up in a nightmare. Where? She whispered, her voice so quiet they had to lean close to hear. Where is my family? Dr. Zeth Carey felt his heart break a little. This was always the worst part of his job, telling survivors about the losses they had suffered. But looking at this small, brave human who had fought so hard to live, he knew he had to be gentle. Maya, he said softly, my name is Dr. Zeth Carey. You're safe now. You're on a medical station and we've been taking care of you. My mom and dad? My little brother Tommy? The silence in the room was answer enough. Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't break down the way most beings would. Instead, something else flickered across her face. It took Dr. Zeth Carey a moment to recognize what it was. Determination. Even in her grief, even barely recovered from injuries that should have killed her, Maya Chen was already planning to survive whatever came next. She was just 12 years old, but in that moment, she reminded Dr. Zeth Carey of the ancient warriors his own people used to tell stories about. I remember, she whispered. I remember what really happened. And with those words, Dr. Zeth Carey knew that Maya's fight for life was just the beginning. Whatever had happened to her family, whoever was responsible, this wounded human child was about to become very dangerous to some very powerful people. He just didn't realize yet how dangerous she would become to everyone. Agent Cathor had investigated many crimes in his 300 years of service to the Galactic Enforcement Division. Murder, theft, smuggling, corruption, he had seen it all. But he had never been called to question a human child who had survived what should have been impossible. Standing 12 feet tall, with scales that gleamed like black metal and eyes that glowed amber in the dim light, Cathor knew he could be intimidating. His people, the Draconians, were feared throughout the galaxy as living weapons. Their strength could crush steel, their claws could tear through armor, and their breath could melt starship hulls. Most beings trembled when they met a Draconian. Maya Chen just looked up at him and said, You're very tall. Cathor found himself almost smiling. Almost. Draconians didn't smile often, but this small human's calm reaction to his fearsome appearance was refreshing. I am Agent Cathor, he said, his voice a deep rumble that vibrated through the medical bay. I am here to ask you some questions about what happened to your ship. Maya nodded, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at her healing injuries. 3 days had passed since her surgery, and her recovery continued to amaze the medical staff. What should have taken months was happening in weeks. I remember everything, she said quietly. I wish I didn't, but I do. Dr. Zeth Carey had prepared Cathor for this conversation, explaining his suspicions about the nature of Maya's injuries. The evidence pointed to sabotage, but they needed her testimony to understand what had really happened aboard the colony ship New Horizon. Tell me about the day of the accident, Cathor said, activating his recording device. Maya's small hands clenched into fists, and for a moment, Cathor saw something in her eyes that reminded him of battle-hardened warriors. This child had seen horrors that would break most adults, yet she sat up straight and spoke clearly. It wasn't an accident, she said. Commander Voss did it on purpose. The name sent a chill through Cathor's massive frame. Commander Voss was the security chief of the New Horizon, a decorated veteran with an excellent service record. If Maya was right, then this case was far more serious than anyone had realized. Tell me exactly what you saw, Cathor said gently. Maya took a shaky breath and began her story. She described how Commander Voss had come to their family quarters during the night shift, when most of the colonists were asleep. He had told her parents there was a security concern that required their immediate attention. Mom and Dad trusted him, Maya said, her voice getting smaller. We all did. He had been protecting us for the whole journey from Earth, but when they opened the door, his face was different. Cold. Mean. Cathor listened as Maya described the terrible scene that followed. Commander Voss hadn't just murdered her family quickly. He had taken his time, making Maya watch as he killed her parents and then her 4-year-old brother Tommy. He had told her that humans were a disease in the galaxy, that they didn't deserve to spread to other worlds. He said my people were too dangerous to be allowed to grow, Maya whispered. He said we would destroy everything we touched, just like we destroyed our own planet Earth. But the worst part, the detail that made Cathor's claws extend involuntarily, was what Voss had done next. He made me watch him sabotage the plasma conduits, Maya continued. He wanted me to see how easy it was to make it look like an accident. He said I would die too, but not right away. He wanted me to live long enough to tell the investigators that it was just a ship malfunction. Cathor's amber eyes blazed with anger. The cruelty of forcing a child to witness her family's murder was bad enough, but to make her an unwilling participant in covering up the crime was monstrous. How did you survive the explosion? He asked. Maya's expression became distant, as if she was seeing it happen again. Commander Voss didn't expect the plasma to spread as fast as it did. When the conduits exploded, he got caught in the blast too. I saw him burning as he tried to get away. I thought he was dead. But you survived. I hid behind the emergency bulkhead when I saw what was happening. The plasma still reached me, but not as much as it reached my family. Her voice broke for the first time since she had started talking. I tried to help them, but they were already gone. Cathor felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Draconians were not known for their emotional responses, but this small human's courage and pain touched something deep inside him. She had faced unimaginable horror, and somehow found the strength to survive, to remember, to testify. Maya, he said carefully. Do you know why Commander Voss would do such a thing? She nodded. He talked while he was hurting my family. He said he worked for someone called the Hegemony. They pay people to make sure humans don't get to settle on new worlds. The name hit Cathor like a physical blow. The Hegemony was a shadowy organization that Galactic Enforcement had been trying to investigate for years. They were rumored to have agents throughout the government and military, working to prevent certain species from expanding their territories, but they had never found solid proof of their existence until now. The Hegemony wants to stop human colonization? Commander Voss said humans were the biggest threat the galaxy had ever seen. He said we were too aggressive, too adaptable. If we were allowed to spread to other systems, we would eventually take over everything. Maya looked up at Cathor with those steady brown eyes. He said even killing one ship full of humans was worth it to protect everyone else. Cathor began to understand the true scope of what they were dealing with. The New Horizon wasn't the first human colony ship to suffer accidents. Over the past 5 years, at least 6 other vessels had been lost under suspicious circumstances. At the time, investigators had blamed equipment failures, navigation errors, or encounters with dangerous phenomena. Now it seemed likely that all of those disasters had been planned. Maya, Cathor said, I need you to know that what you're telling me puts you in great danger. If the Hegemony learns that you survived and can testify about what really happened, they will try to silence you. I know, she said simply, but other human ships are out there. Other families like mine. If I don't tell the truth, the Hegemony will keep killing them. Cathor stared at this 12-year-old human child, who was willing to risk her life to protect people she had never met. In his 3 centuries of life, he had met very few beings with that kind of moral courage. Most adults would have chosen safety over justice. I will protect you, he found himself saying. I give you my word as a draconian warrior. Maya smiled for the first time since he had arrived. It was a small, sad smile, but it transformed her face completely. Thank you, Agent Cathor, but I think you should know something else. What? Commander Voss didn't die in the explosion. I saw him in the medical reports Dr. Zethkari showed me. He's listed as a survivor, currently recovering in the ship's medical bay. Cathor's blood turned cold. If Voss was alive, if he was still on the colony ship, then he could finish what he had started. Worse, he could report back to his Hegemony handlers that Maya had survived, and was now in a position to expose their entire operation. "We need to contact the New Horizon immediately," Cathor said, reaching for his communication device. But before he could make the call, alarms began blaring throughout the medical station. The lights shifted to emergency amber and the computer's voice echoed through the corridors. "Incoming vessels detected. Unknown configuration. All personnel to alert stations." Cathor looked out the nearest viewport and saw something that confirmed his worst fears. 3 unmarked ships were approaching the medical station, moving in the precise formation used by hegemony operatives. They had found Maya, and they were coming to finish what Commander Voss had started. Cathor had served the Galactic Enforcement Division for 3 centuries, and in all that time, he had never disobeyed a direct order. Duty was everything to a Draconian. It was burned into their souls from birth, as much a part of them as their scales or their flame. But as he stood in the medical station's communication center, listening to his superior's voice crackling through the speakers, Cathor felt that lifelong certainty beginning to crack. "Agent Cathor, you will transfer the human child to the incoming security team immediately," commanded Director Thane. "This is a matter of galactic security." Cathor's amber eyes narrowed. Director Thane was Altarian, like Dr. Zethkari, but where the doctor was kind and gentle, Thane was cold and calculating. More importantly, Cathor had been investigating corruption in the Enforcement Division for months. Several high-ranking officials had been making decisions that seemed designed to help the hegemony, rather than stop them. "Sir, the child is still recovering from severe injuries. Moving her could be dangerous. The medical team reports she is stable enough for transport. You have your orders, Agent." Through the viewport, Cathor could see the 3 unmarked ships docking with the station. They moved with military precision and he recognized the design. These weren't official enforcement vessels. They were hegemony ships trying to look legitimate. "Who exactly am I transferring her to?" Cathor asked. There was a pause before Director Thane answered. "Special Investigation Unit. They have jurisdiction in cases involving threats to galactic stability." Cathor's claws extended slightly. There was no Special Investigation Unit. He knew every department in galactic enforcement, every special division, every secret project. Thane was lying, which meant he was either being fooled by the hegemony or working with them. "I need to see proper authorization codes," Cathor said. "Agent Cathor, you are questioning direct orders from your superior. This is grounds for disciplinary action, and letting a child be murdered is grounds for losing my honor," Cathor replied quietly. The communication channel went silent. Cathor turned away from the speakers and walked back toward the medical bay where Maya was waiting. Dr. Zethkari met him in the corridor, his blue face pale with worry. "They're not really enforcement agents, are they?" the doctor asked. "No, they're here to kill Maya." "What are you going to do?" Cathor stopped walking. It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of everything he had ever believed about duty, honor, and justice. For 300 years he had followed orders without question. He had believed that the system worked, that his superiors knew best. That duty meant obedience. Now he understood that sometimes duty meant choosing what was right over what was easy. "I'm going to protect her," he said. Dr. Zethkari nodded slowly. "The medical staff will help however we can." They reached Maya's room to find her sitting up in bed, looking remarkably calm for someone whose life was in immediate danger. Her injuries were healing with the same impossible speed that had amazed everyone, but she was still weak, still recovering. "They're here for me, aren't they?" she asked when she saw their faces. Cathor nodded. "Yes, but they won't reach you." Maya studied his massive form, taking in the way his scales had darkened with battle readiness, how his claws had extended, how small wisps of flame escaped from between his teeth when he spoke. Most beings would have been terrified. Maya just looked thoughtful. "You're going to fight them?" she asked. "Yes, how many are there?" "At least 20 that I can see. Probably more." Maya was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised him. "I don't want you to die because of me." Cathor felt that unfamiliar warmth in his chest again. This human child who had already lost everything was worried about his safety. It was exactly the kind of selfless concern that the hegemony claimed humans were incapable of feeling. "I won't die," he promised, "and neither will you." The sound of footsteps echoed through the corridors outside. The hegemony operatives were moving through the station, probably telling the staff they were conducting a routine security inspection. Cathor knew they would reach the medical bay within minutes. Dr. Zethkari, take Maya to the emergency escape pods, Cathor ordered. If something happens to me, get her away from here. I'm not leaving, Maya said firmly. These people killed my family. I want to face them. Cathor knelt down so he could look directly into her eyes. Maya, you are braver than most warriors I have known. But bravery doesn't mean fighting when you're not ready. It means living to fight when you can win. Before Maya could argue, the medical bay doors slid open. 5 figures in black armor stepped inside, their faces hidden behind combat masks. They carried weapons designed to kill, not capture. Agent Cathor, said the leader, his voice artificially deepened by his mask's speaker. Step away from the human. This is official enforcement business. Show me your authorization, Cathor replied, rising to his full height. You're not in a position to make demands, Draconian. The insult was deliberate. Calling Cathor by his species name instead of his rank was meant to remind him that he was different, that he didn't really belong in galactic enforcement. It was the kind of subtle prejudice that the hegemony used to turn species against each other. It was also a mistake. Thor's flame ignited. The blast of superheated plasma turned the first operative into ash before he could even scream. The others scattered, diving for cover behind medical equipment as Cathor's breath weapon turned the air itself into a furnace. Take the girl alive, one of them shouted. Kill everything else. The battle that followed was unlike anything the medical station had ever seen. Cathor moved with the deadly grace that had made Draconians legendary throughout the galaxy. His claws sliced through armor and weapons like they were made of paper. His tail swept operatives off their feet, sending them crashing into walls hard enough to crack bones. But there were more coming. Cathor could hear them in the corridors, moving to surround the medical bay. Even a Draconian had limits, and he was facing odds that would challenge an entire squad of warriors. An energy blast caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Another hit his leg, dropping him to one knee. Through the pain and the smoke, he saw more operatives rushing through the doorway. Agent Cathor, Maya's voice cut through the chaos. He turned to see her standing by the medical bay's communication console, her small fingers working frantically over the controls. She should have been running, should have been hiding, but instead she was... What are you doing? He gasped. Something they won't expect, she replied. The station's emergency broadcast system activated, sending Maya's signal not just to nearby ships, but to every communication relay in the sector. Her voice, clear and strong despite her injuries, began telling her story to anyone who would listen. My name is Maya Chen, she said into the microphone. I'm 12 years old and I'm human. 3 days ago, agents working for something called the hegemony murdered my family and tried to murder me. Now they're here to finish the job. Cathor watched in amazement as Maya continued her broadcast, describing everything she had witnessed, naming Commander Voss, revealing the hegemony's plan to eliminate human colonies. She wasn't just testifying anymore. She was declaring war on the forces that had destroyed her family. The hegemony operatives realized what was happening and rushed toward the communication console. Cathor summoned his remaining strength and intercepted them, his flame turning their weapons to molten metal. But there were too many of them, and he was badly wounded. As he fell, overwhelmed by enemy fire, Cathor heard Maya's voice still broadcasting, still fighting in the only way she could. I'm not asking for revenge, she was saying. I'm asking for justice, for my family, for all the other families they've killed, and for all the ones they plan to kill. As darkness closed in around him, Cathor realized that Maya had done something no weapon could accomplish. She had turned herself into a symbol, a rallying cry that would echo across the galaxy. The hegemony had come to silence one small witness. Instead, they had created something much more dangerous, a human martyr whose words would inspire others to stand up and fight back. Cathor's last conscious thought was a prayer to his ancestors that someone, somewhere, was listening to Maya's broadcast and would come to help them. He just didn't realize that help was already on the way. Maya's voice traveled faster than light across the galaxy, carried by quantum communication relays from system to system. Her words reached mining colonies on distant asteroids, research stations orbiting alien suns, and bustling trade centers where dozens of species mingled together. Within hours, beings across hundreds of worlds had heard the testimony of a 12-year-old human girl whose family had been murdered by the hegemony. On the ocean world of Aquatica, the dolphin-like cetaceans stopped their deep-sea meditations to listen. They had always been peaceful creatures, avoiding the conflicts that plagued other species. But hearing Maya describe how Commander Voss had forced her to watch her little brother die, something stirred in their gentle hearts. "This cannot be allowed," sang Elder Delphus to her pod. "If they kill children for being born the wrong species, none of us are safe." In the crystal caves of Minerva, the rock-skinned geologians paused their ancient stone-carving rituals. They had lived for millennia without involving themselves in galactic politics, believing that patience and time would solve all problems. But Maya's words carried a pain that transcended species boundaries. "The small human shows courage that shames us," rumbled High Carver Granite. "How can we remain silent when such evil walks among the stars?" On 100 worlds and 1,000 cities, Maya's broadcast interrupted daily life and forced beings to confront an uncomfortable truth. The hegemony's propaganda had been subtle but effective, spreading whispers that humans were violent, aggressive, and dangerous. They painted humanity as a species that would destroy everything they touched, just as they had supposedly destroyed their own homeworld. But the voice coming through their communication systems belonged to a wounded child who spoke not of revenge, but of justice. Not of hatred, but of hope. "I know Commander Voss is probably listening to this," Maya said, her voice steady despite the sounds of battle in the background. "I want him to know that I forgive him." Those words stopped conversations in cantinas, boardrooms, and government chambers across the galaxy. Forgiveness was not what anyone expected from a human whose family had been slaughtered. "I forgive him," Maya continued, "because hatred is what made him do this terrible thing. The hegemony taught him to fear humans so much that he thought killing children was justified. I won't become like that. I won't let fear and hatred poison my heart the way it poisoned his." On the technological world of circuitry, the AI collective known as the Network paused their endless calculations to process this unexpected data. They had been studying human behavior since first contact, trying to understand how such a chaotic species could accomplish so much in such a short time. Query: how does a damaged juvenile exhibit greater wisdom than adult military personnel? Ask the primary processing node. Analysis suggests human emotional responses include capacity for moral growth under extreme stress, replied the secondary node. Recommendation: previous assessments of human species require substantial revision. Maya's broadcast was doing more than just revealing the hegemony's crimes. It was forcing the entire galaxy to reconsider everything they thought they knew about humanity. Back on the medical station, Cathor struggled to remain conscious as hegemony operatives moved to shut down the transmission. His massive form was scorched and bleeding, but he could still hear Maya's voice echoing through the corridors. "The hegemony says humans are too dangerous to be allowed to spread across the galaxy," she was saying. "They say we'll destroy everything we touch. But look around you. My parents came to space not to conquer, but to farm. My little brother Tommy wanted to study alien insects so he could help protect them. We came to the stars to learn and grow, not to destroy." As Maya spoke, something unprecedented began happening across the galaxy. Government officials who had been secretly following hegemony directives started questioning their orders. Military officers who had looked the other way during suspicious accidents began demanding investigations. Citizens who had accepted anti-human propaganda without thought started asking uncomfortable questions. On the war-torn world of Battalia, where conflicts had raged for centuries, the rival factions called a temporary ceasefire to listen to Maya's words. General Warfare, leader of the Red Claws, found himself wiping away tears as Maya described her brother's dreams of becoming a xenobiologist. "If a human child can choose forgiveness over revenge," he announced to his warriors, "perhaps we can choose peace over war." But the most significant response came from the draconian homeworld. High Admiral Zarthess, Cathor's clutch sister, was in the middle of a war council when Maya's broadcast reached their planet. The Draconians had been preparing for a major campaign against pirates in the Outer Rim, but everything stopped as Maya's voice filled their ancient halls. "She speaks of Agent Cathor," observed Commander Flamestrike. "He gave his word to protect her." Admiral Zarthus's eyes blazed with pride and fury. Her brother was dying light years away, fighting to protect a human child while corrupt officials tried to silence the truth. The hegemony had made a critical error. They had threatened someone under draconian protection. "Assemble the third battle fleet," she commanded. "All ships maximum speed to the Kepler system." "Admiral, that will leave our own borders undefended," warned her tactical officer. "Honor is more important than borders," she replied. "My brother has given his word. The Draconian Empire will not let it be broken." As her fleet prepared to launch, Admiral Zarthus made an announcement that would echo through galactic history. "By order of the Draconian High Command, the human child Maya Chen is hereby granted imperial protection. Any who harm her will answer to our flames." It was the first time in galactic history that the Draconians had extended their protection to a non-Draconian. The announcement sent shockwaves through every government in known space. Meanwhile, Maya's broadcast continued, carrying across space to reach ears that the hegemony never expected to be listening. On the new horizon, the human colony ship where her nightmare had begun, Commander Voss sat in the medical bay listening to the voice of the girl he had tried to kill. His burns were healing slowly, unlike Maya's miraculous recovery. But it wasn't his physical injuries that caused him pain as he heard her words of forgiveness. It was the growing realization that everything the hegemony had told him might be wrong. Around him, other survivors of the accident, humans who had believed his story about equipment failure, were beginning to understand what had really happened to Maya's family. Their looks of sympathy were turning to suspicion, then to anger. "You did this," whispered Maria Santos, whose own children had been friends with Maya and Tommy. "You murdered those babies." Commander Voss tried to speak, tried to explain that he had been protecting the galaxy from a dangerous species. But the words sounded hollow now, especially with Maya's voice still echoing from the speakers, speaking not of violence or conquest, but of dreams and hope and forgiveness. Across the galaxy, Maya's broadcast was accomplishing what no army could have achieved. It was changing minds, opening hearts, and revealing the truth about both humanity and the hegemony. Species that had never worked together were beginning to coordinate their responses. Trade alliances were forming into military pacts. The galaxy was choosing sides, and they were choosing Maya's side. "I don't know if anyone is listening," Maya said as her broadcast began to fade, her strength finally giving out. "I don't know if anyone cares about one human family. But if you do care, if you believe that children shouldn't be murdered for being born different, then please help us. Not just humans, but everyone the hegemony wants to silence." As her voice finally went quiet, the galaxy held its breath. Then, one by one, worlds began to answer her call. The hegemony fleet arrived at the medical station expecting to find silence. Their plan was simple: destroy any evidence of their crimes, eliminate the witnesses, and continue their shadow war against human expansion. Commander Voss recovered enough to lead the mission personally, stood on the bridge of the flagship Purifier, and prepared to finish what he had started. "Scan shows minimal defenses," reported his tactical officer. "Just the medical station and a few patrol craft. We should be able to complete the mission within minutes." Voss nodded, his scarred face grim behind his helmet. Maya's broadcast had spread across several systems before they managed to shut it down, but they could still control the narrative. The hegemony's media networks would paint it as the desperate lies of a traumatized child, while their agents in various governments would quietly suppress any investigations. "All ships, prepare to fire," he commanded. But as the weapons charged, something appeared on their sensors that made every officer on the bridge freeze in shock. Ships were coming out of hyperspace. Not just a few ships, hundreds of them. The first wave was draconian, massive black battleships that looked like flying dragons, their hulls gleaming with scales of living metal. Admiral Zarthus's third battle fleet had covered impossible distance in record time. Their crews pushed beyond normal limits by fury and honor. But they weren't alone. Cetacean exploration vessels emerged from different vectors, their graceful curves hiding surprisingly powerful defensive systems. The usually peaceful ocean dwellers had armed themselves for war. Geologian mining barges, converted with heavy weapons and armor plating, rumbled into position. The patient stone carvers had finally been moved to anger. Sleek network ships phased into reality, their AI crews calculating targeting solutions with inhuman precision. Even the wild Battaglia clans had sent ships, their mismatched fleet united for the first time in centuries by a common cause. "Sir, whispered the tactical officer. "We count over 300 vessels representing at least 20 different species. They all seem to be protecting the medical station." Commander Voss stared at the display in disbelief. This wasn't possible. The galaxy species barely tolerated each other on the best of days. They certainly didn't unite to protect human children. "Open a channel," he ordered, his voice shaking slightly. The main screen flickered to life, showing not the face of a military commander, but that of a small human girl sitting in a medical bed. Maya had recovered enough to speak again, and she looked directly at Voss with those steady brown eyes that had haunted his dreams. "Hello, Commander," she said quietly. "I was hoping you would come." "You should be dead," Voss snarled. "Your entire species should be dead. You're a plague on the galaxy." Maya shook her head sadly. "Is that really what you believe? Or is that what the hegemony taught you to believe?" Around Voss, his crew shifted uncomfortably. Many of them had heard Maya's earlier broadcast, had listened to her words of forgiveness and hope. Seeing her now, wounded but unbroken, speaking with quiet dignity to the man who had murdered her family, they were beginning to question everything they had been told. "The hegemony protects the galaxy from dangerous species," Voss said, but his voice lacked conviction. "By murdering children?" Maya asked. "By forcing little girls to watch their families die? Is that what protection looks like?" Behind Voss, one of his officers removed his helmet. Then another. The crew of the Purifier were seeing Maya not as a dangerous human threat, but as exactly what she was. A brave child who had suffered unspeakable tragedy and still chose forgiveness over hatred. "You destroyed my family," Maya continued, "but I won't let you destroy my hope. I still believe that beings can choose to be better than their worst impulses. I still believe that fear doesn't have to lead to hatred." Admiral Zarthes's voice cut through the transmission. "Commander Voss, this is Admiral Zarthes of the Draconian Imperial Navy. The child Maya Chen is under our protection. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Voss looked around his bridge and saw doubt in every face. His own certainty was cracking as he stared at Maya, remembering the terror in her eyes as he had murdered her family, contrasting it with the compassion she showed him now. "Sir," said his communications officer quietly, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 ships in our fleet. They don't want to fire on the medical station." "Cowards," Voss spat, but even he could hear the desperation in his voice. Maya leaned forward slightly, her expression earnest. "Commander Voss, it's not too late. You can still choose to be better than this. You can still choose to stop the killing." For a moment, just a moment, Voss felt something crack inside his chest. Looking at this child, this impossibly brave, impossibly forgiving child, he remembered why he had joined the military in the first place. Not to murder innocents, but to protect them. Then his training reasserted itself, the years of hegemony propaganda drowning out his conscience. "All ships, fire!" he screamed. But his crew didn't move. They stood at their stations, looking at their screens where Maya's face still shone with quiet courage, and they couldn't bring themselves to pull the triggers. "I said fire!" "No, sir," said his tactical officer, a young Altarian who had joined the hegemony believing he was fighting for justice. "I won't murder a child." One by one, Voss's crew stepped away from their stations. The bridge that had been filled with hatred moments before was now silent, except for the sound of Voss's ragged breathing. On the screen, Maya smiled, not with victory but with genuine relief. "Thank you," she said simply. The battle that everyone had expected never came. Instead, ship after ship in the hegemony fleet powered down their weapons and requested permission to surrender. They had come expecting to face human aggression and violence, the qualities that their leaders had warned them about. Instead, they found a wounded child offering forgiveness to her family's killer. In the months that followed, the galaxy would change in ways no one had anticipated. The hegemony's shadow network was exposed, their agents arrested, their propaganda machine dismantled. But more importantly, the species of the galaxy had seen what humans were really like when tested by the worst possible circumstances. Maya Chen became the first human ambassador to the Galactic Council, not because she sought power, but because a dozen different species requested her specifically. They wanted to learn from the small human who had shown them a better way to resolve conflicts. Cathor, recovered from his injuries, became her permanent guardian and closest friend. The bond between the gentle human child and the fearsome draconian warrior became legendary, proof that friendship could bridge any divide. Commander Voss was tried for his crimes, but on Maya's request he was sentenced to service rather than execution. He spent the rest of his life working to repair the damage he had caused, eventually becoming one of the galaxy's most effective advocates for interspecies cooperation. And throughout known space, whenever someone spoke of giving up hope, of surrendering to hatred or fear, others would remember the story of a wounded girl who faced her family's killer with forgiveness instead of revenge. The ending that everyone had dreaded. War between species, cycles of vengeance, the triumph of hatred over hope, never came to pass. Instead, the galaxy learned that sometimes the greatest victories come not from the strongest weapons, but from the courage to choose compassion when you have every reason to choose cruelty. Maya Chen had lost her family, but she had gained something else. The knowledge that even in the darkest moments, beings could still choose to be better than their worst impulses. And that choice, more than any weapon or strategy, would protect the galaxy for generations to come.